Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. Today we're going to talk about the results of the New Jersey governor's race and the Astroworld tragedy. I'm Zachary Klein and this is The Big Picture. So I'm joined now by Anthony Corbi. Anthony, welcome once again.
Good afternoon.
So my first question to you about the New Jersey governor's race. This race was a lot closer than than anybody expected. Only the margin now is about 3 percentage points. So can you give me a reason why you think this race ended up being so close?
Well, I mean, it kind of just reflects the mood of the country right now. It's really just all going against the Democrats. The Virginia governor's race, the Democrat lost there, and there were even projections weeks before Election Day that in the Virginia governor's race that the Republican was going to win that. And the poll numbers were tight, and you know that the poll numbers skew Democrats. So when you're tied in polls, you know that you're in trouble there. The thing that was surprising for me about the New Jersey governor's race was, like you said, how close it actually was. I don't think any of us anticipated it to be within 3 percentage points. If you look on social media and you look at Phil Murphy's pages versus Jack Ciattarelli's pages, there was obviously a huge difference in the perspective from people on social media. So you kind of had it in the back of your mind, like, maybe we're in a little bit of trouble here. And I even said to you, I think a couple of weeks before the election, when they were calling Obama, and you don't really call in Barack Obama to do a speech for you unless you feel that you're in trouble. Because someone like Obama is popular with the Democratic Party. I mean, you don't want to, ask too much of him. Ask him to go and get involved in all the different races across the country. But the fact that he was being called into New Jersey was pretty significant, and that was a little bit worrisome. And the poll numbers were closing in the last few days before the election. I guess the thing that wasn't surprising about the race was that the way that it resulted, Murphy still won with the same percentage that he had in the polls, which is around 50%, which is kind of the same thing that we've seen the past couple of years with both of the last presidential elections in 2016 and 2020, where the Democrats' numbers were spot on, but the Republicans' numbers were significantly lower than they actually were in during voting.
Yeah.
You kind of have to, look at things with a broader perspective now when you look at polls that 9% of the population that's interviewed isn't going to vote independent, which is what these polls were showing, or not vote at all. Or, you kind of have to expect that the Republicans' numbers are going to be a lot more than they are reflected in the polls. So I think it was definitely a shock for the Democrats. I think that they didn't expect to be going into the second day to win just one election across the country. But yeah, it definitely paves the way for something significant for the Republican Party next year.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's going to be significant, especially when we look at midterms next year. Is the Republican Party just going to run away with it? And so the next question that I have for you, Tony, is that we saw some people on social media, such as Ian Smith, who owns the Attilas Gym down in who owned the Attilas Gym down in South Jersey, claim that in Bergen County there were 50,000 Republican vote or Democratic votes that all dropped in at once, just like what we saw in states like Michigan and Arizona last year. So how do you debunk these claims of fraud when you're looking at these votes being dropped in all at once?
Well, I'm not familiar with the situation personally, but I know Jack Ciattarelli has come out and said he doesn't believe there was any evidence of voter fraud. A lot of the ballots that came in later, past midnight, were mail-in ballots, because you couldn't count mail-in ballots because of Republican legislation, actually, until after midnight. So a lot of the votes that came in after that were obviously skewing Democrat, because Republicans are against mail-in voting. I think that it was big of Chitterelli to come out and concede the race once more votes came in and say he doesn't believe that there was any voter fraud. That showed, I think, a really stark contrast with the Trump administration last year. And honestly, even from a Democratic perspective, I was, I guess, happy to see that. I was, I guess, relieved that Chitterelli was taking that position, that he wasn't going to push the envelope and have push for a riot at the state capitol in Trenton. But I don't think that there was any voter fraud in this election. I would hope that they do an audit of the election just to completely debunk these claims, and I hope that they do more of that in future elections, just because we do live in a democracy, and unfortunately people have opinions that might be extreme or ill-informed, and so the best way to combat misinformation is just to prove that things aren't true. So I think, the Republicans that have called for an audit in the past two elections, we should get that audit for this New Jersey governor's race, even if it's months after inauguration, just to completely debunk the claims, and just prove that there was no evidence of voter fraud in this election, so that way we don't repeat the same thing that happened last year on January 6th.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that the Chitterelli saying that there's no voter fraud was a huge step in the right direction for the Republican Party. So that's going to be our coverage for the New Jersey governor's election. Tony, you're going to stay with us now as we transition to talk about the other big stories that happened this week. We all woke up on Saturday morning to find out that there was a tragedy at a Travis Scott music festival in Houston, Texas. 8 people were killed on Saturday after there was a crowd surge toward the stage. Many others were hospitalized or injured. We found out today that a 9-year-old boy that had been in a coma all week passed away from complications related to the Travis Scott Astroworld Music Festival. So, Tony, my first question to you is, how does something like this happen when there's security and safety measures that are supposed to be in place at these music festivals that have 50, 60,000 people at them?
Well, I think that it's really, anytime you're running an event, it's definitely hard to ensure everybody's safety, especially at concerts. But there is a lot of liability involved. And there are two things that I don't listen to Travis Scott. I didn't know that this happened for a few days, or maybe it was just the next day. But I'm a metal fan, and a lot of metal concerts have these mosh pits that people run around in circles, people swing their arms. But the thing at metal concerts is that if somebody falls in the mosh pit, someone else is always picking them back up. It's not, you think these big, bulky metal guys, they're all running around. They don't really care if someone falls, but actually they're some of the most caring people that I've ever met. And I haven't been in a mosh pit before, but I've seen videos of mosh pits and people being helped up after falling down. And then security officers, at Tool concerts, for example, when someone goes crowd surfing, security officers will help them get back down because they always go to the front of the stage. And so the security officers will help them dismount from being on top of the crowd, and that I think that's definitely something that's obviously necessary, and kind of a good thing that the band makes sure that they're doing that they're helping them down. And then the other thing is, anytime you're running some sort of event with entertainment, like this past weekend, I was at a Carolina Hurricanes game in North Carolina, and so when I was waiting for an Uber to take me back to my hotel, my phone died, and I didn't have any way of getting back. So I went back in the arena, and I asked them if they could order an Uber for me or a Lyft or something like that, and they offered to call me a cab instead. And then not even 10 minutes later, there was a cab that arrived, and I actually got back to the hotel before I would have if I had taken an Uber, and at less of a price. Yeah. And I think that there's always that sort of responsibility. If you're running some form of entertainment, that you have a commitment to the people that are attending to make sure that they're safe, that they get home safe, and just have a good time, obviously. And I feel like I haven't completely read into this story, but I feel like if 10 people died at such an event, that wasn't the culture that was going on. And that's honestly really disappointing for me.
Yeah, and this was not the first time that this happened. Something like this happened. Obviously, nobody died before, but this is not the first time that something like this has happened at a Travis Scott event. Back in 2019, at the same Astroworld Music Festival, this same thing happened where the crowd surged toward the stage, but luckily nobody was killed during that. And then in 2018, in two separate instances at a Travis Scott concert in Arkansas, which took place in a theater with several balconies, there was patrons who were hanging from the third and fourth tier balconies off the railings. That was completely unsafe, and they could fall and land on other patrons. So that was a completely unsafe situation. So definitely something to look at. I mean, I currently actually work in a theater in the entertainment industry, and I can testify to say that we have certain security and safety measures, especially now with the COVID pandemic. We have more security presence than we ever did before. So it is really interesting to see how concerts and stuff are opening back up. And I also know that other artists such as Harry Styles, he had a concert, I believe, in Milwaukee on Friday night, and he stopped the concert to make sure that everybody was okay. And believe it or not, there was somebody that was trapped between the fence and the stage, and he stopped the concert to make sure that that patron was okay. So definitely a class act by Harry Styles in that case. And Tony, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, no problem.
That'll do it for this episode of The Big Picture. I'm Zachary Klein. We hope to see you back next time. Until then, have a good week.